The moment you hear the word diabetes, the first thing everyone tells you is stop eating bread. Your doctor says it, your family says it, every article on the internet says it. So you do. You cut bread out completely. For a while you manage, then one morning you crack, you eat a roll, maybe two, and the guilt hits you like a wall. You check your sugar, see the number, and decide you have failed. I have watched this exact cycle play out in hundreds of patients over 15 years of clinical practice. And I need to tell you something clearly: bread is not your enemy. The way you eat bread is. There is a measurable, physiological difference between bread that sends your blood sugar through the roof and bread that barely moves the needle. And that difference has almost nothing to do with whole wheat versus white. That is the conversation everyone skips. What actually determines how bread hits your bloodstream involves factors most people have never heard of: the structure of the grain, the way the dough was prepared, what you eat before the bread, what time of day you eat it, even whether you toast it or not. These are not small details. These are the details that decide whether a slice of bread is a problem or a perfectly manageable part of your meal. What you are about to hear is the conversation your doctor does not have time to walk you through in a 12-minute appointment. Nobody profits from teaching you how to eat bread correctly. The system makes money when you stay confused, stay afraid, and stay dependent on medication adjustments. So let me walk you through this properly from the beginning. To understand why some bread destroys your blood sugar and other bread barely touches it, you need to see what happens inside your body from the first bite. You chew a slice of bread. Already in your mouth, enzymes in your saliva begin breaking the starch down into simpler sugars. You swallow. The bread reaches your stomach, where acids and mechanical churning break it into a thick paste. That paste moves into your small intestine, and this is where the real action happens. Enzymes attack the starch and convert it into glucose, pure blood sugar. That glucose crosses the intestinal wall and enters your bloodstream. Now picture a highway. Glucose molecules are cars merging onto that highway. In a healthy body, the pancreas sees the traffic and immediately sends out insulin, which acts as a traffic controller, opening lanes, directing cars off the highway and into your cells where the sugar gets used for energy. The system runs smoothly, traffic flows, no pileup. In a diabetic or pre-diabetic body, the traffic controller is slow, overwhelmed, sometimes barely showing up. The cars keep merging, but the lanes are not opening fast enough. Glucose stacks up in the blood. That pileup is what your meter shows you as a spike, and every spike does damage to your blood vessels, your nerves, and your organs, whether you feel it or not. Here is the part that changes everything. Not all bread sends the same amount of traffic at the same speed. Some bread is 100 cars merging at once. Other bread is a slow, steady trickle that your pancreas can actually manage. Scientists measure this with something called the glycemic index. Think of it as a speedometer for how fast a food turns into sugar in your blood. The higher the number, the faster the flood. And the type of bread you choose determines that number far more than most people realize. This is where most people get deceived. The moment they get a diabetes diagnosis, they walk into the grocery store and swap white bread for whole wheat. They feel responsible. They feel like they made the right choice. And their blood sugar barely changes. Here is why. Most commercial whole wheat bread has a glycemic index nearly identical to white bread. Sometimes the difference is 2 to 5 points. That is nothing. Your bloodstream cannot tell them apart. The reason is simple. The wheat kernel may have started whole, but by the time industrial mills are finished with it, the grain has been ground into a powder so fine that your digestive enzymes tear through it almost instantly. The structure is gone. The label says whole wheat, but the flour behaves exactly like refined flour once it hits your small intestine. Same speed, same flood of glucose, same spike. What actually matters is not the type of grain. It is the physical structure of the grain. Scientists call this the food matrix, the intact architecture of the kernel that your body has to work through before it can extract the sugar. Picture the difference between a whole walnut and walnut dust. The dust dissolves instantly. The whole nut takes time to break down. Bread works exactly the same way. When a grain kernel is still partly intact, your enzymes cannot access the starch all at once. They have to chip away at it slowly. Glucose trickles into your blood instead of flooding it. So when you stand in that bread aisle, stop reading the front of the package. Turn it around. Look at the ingredients. If the first word is whole wheat flour, that flour is finely ground and it is fast. What you want to see is whole intact grains, cracked wheat, or sprouted grains. Those words mean the structure survived. That structure is your protection. Now that you understand why structure matters more than the name on the label, let me give you something practical. A clear ranking, worst to best, that you can take with you to the store today. At the bottom, number 1, soft white bread and standard commercial sandwich bread. This is essentially pre-digested starch. The grain has been stripped, bleached, and milled into a powder so fine that your body converts it to glucose almost as fast as pure table sugar. For a diabetic pancreas, this is a worst-case scenario. Number 2, commercial whole wheat bread. Marginally better on paper, but as we just covered, the flour is still finely ground. Most diabetic patients see almost no meaningful difference in their post-meal numbers when they switch from white to standard whole wheat. The spike is slightly shorter. It is not gone. Number 3, dense European-style rye bread, the dark, heavy kind you have to actually chew. Rye grain is harder for digestive enzymes to break down, and traditional rye bread retains more of its intact grain structure. The acidity from rye fermentation also slows digestion. The glucose curve flattens noticeably. Number 4, sourdough bread. This is a significant step up, and the reason involves fermentation in ways that will surprise you. I am going to explain exactly why in the next chapter. Number 5, the top tier, sprouted grain bread. During germination, the seed partially converts its starch reserves into other compounds. The grain structure remains largely intact. The result is bread that produces the lowest and slowest blood sugar response of any bread you can buy. This is not about giving up bread. It is about choosing the bread your body can actually manage. When you are at the shelf, look for density, visible grains, and short ingredient lists. If the bread is soft, light, and squeezable, your blood sugar will pay for it. Now let me explain why sourdough landed so high on that list, because the science behind it is something most people have never been told. Traditional sourdough is not made with commercial yeast. It ferments slowly over hours, sometimes days, using natural bacteria and wild yeast. During that long fermentation, several things happen that directly benefit a diabetic body. First, the bacteria produce organic acids, primarily lactic acid and acetic acid. Those acids physically change the structure of the starch in the flour. Some of it converts into what scientists call resistant starch, starch that passes through your small intestine without being broken down into glucose at all. It behaves more like fiber than like a carbohydrate. Your blood never sees it. Second, fermentation partially breaks down gluten and phytic acid, which makes the bread easier on your digestive system and allows your body to absorb minerals more efficiently. Third, and this is the part that surprised even me early in my career, the organic acids in sourdough slow gastric emptying. That means the bread sits in your stomach longer before moving into the intestine where glucose absorption happens. That delay alone flattens the blood sugar curve significantly. Published clinical research shows that sourdough bread produces a 25 to 30% lower blood sugar spike compared to the exact same bread made with commercial yeast, same flour, same recipe. The only difference is fermentation. This is not alternative medicine. This is peer-reviewed metabolic science. What that means for you is straightforward. A person with diabetes or pre-diabetes can potentially eat bread and keep their blood sugar under reasonable control if they choose the right kind and eat it the right way. That is a genuinely important piece of medical knowledge. And this is the moment where I want to stop and say something I tell every patient who sits across from me. Knowing this information is valuable. But knowledge that you do not act on changes nothing. I see it constantly. A patient learns something critical about their health, nods, walks out of my office, and does exactly what they were doing before. If you are watching this and you have diabetes, pre-diabetes, or you are not even sure where your blood sugar stands right now, there is something you can do about that today. Care Health is a free platform that connects you with diabetes screenings, blood sugar monitoring programs, and clinical trials for new metabolic health treatments in your area. You fill in a short form, date of birth, gender, a couple of quick questions. Takes 30 seconds, costs nothing, no commitment, and Care Health matches you with relevant healthcare options near you. Click the link in the description below or scan the QR code on screen. Just point your phone camera at it. As a physician, I always tell my patients, knowing is the first step, but acting on what you know is what actually protects you. Now, let's continue, because how you eat the bread matters just as much as which bread you choose. This is one of the most powerful things I can teach you today, and almost nobody knows about it. Clinical studies in the last several years have shown something remarkable. The order in which you eat foods within the same meal can change your post-meal blood sugar spike by 30 to 40%. Same food, same total amount, just a different sequence on your fork. Here is the mechanism. When you eat vegetables or protein before you touch any carbohydrates, the fiber and protein form a physical and chemical buffer in your stomach and upper intestine. Fiber creates a gel-like layer along the intestinal wall that slows glucose absorption. Protein stimulates early insulin release and triggers a hormone called GLP-1 that slows gastric emptying, meaning food moves out of your stomach and into the intestine more gradually. So if you eat a salad and a piece of chicken first, and then 10 to 15 minutes later you eat your slice of bread, the glucose from that bread enters your bloodstream dramatically slower than if you had eaten the bread on an empty stomach. Think of it this way. Eating bread first on an empty stomach is like pouring water onto a bare concrete floor. It spreads everywhere instantly. Nothing absorbs it, nothing slows it down. But eating fiber and protein first is like laying down a thick sponge before you pour. The water hits the sponge and gets absorbed, held, released slowly. Your pancreas can actually keep up. The practical rule is simple. Vegetables first, protein second, bread last. Every meal, every time. Do not vary this. This single habit, which costs you nothing and requires no medication, can be more effective at flattening your post-meal spike than some of the drugs people take for exactly that purpose. Now, before you go out and buy the best sourdough on the shelf, I need to tell you something that will save you from a very common mistake. Even the best bread, sourdough, sprouted, dense rye, will spike your blood sugar if you eat too much of it at once. Choosing the right bread is only half the equation. The other half is how much of it lands on your plate. Remember the highway analogy. Glycemic index tells you how fast the cars are moving, but there is a second number that matters just as much, called glycemic load, that tells you how many cars are on the highway at the same time. You can have slow-moving cars, but if you send 200 of them onto the road at once, the highway still jams. Your pancreas still gets overwhelmed. This is where most patients go wrong. They find the right bread, feel good about the choice, and eat 3 slices because it is the healthy kind. Their blood sugar spikes, and they cannot understand why. Here is the practical math. A standard slice of bread contains roughly 12 to 15 grams of carbohydrate. Most diabetic meal plans suggest keeping total carbohydrates per meal somewhere in the range of 30 to 45 grams depending on the individual. That means 1 slice of bread per meal is a reasonable starting point for most people with type 2 diabetes paired with the protein and fiber we discussed in the previous chapter. Bread can absolutely fit inside that budget. But it cannot be the entire meal. It has to share the plate with vegetables, with protein, with fat. When bread becomes a side instead of the centerpiece, your blood sugar stays manageable. When bread becomes the main event, even the best sourdough in the world will not save you from the spike. This is something that genuinely shocks most of my patients when I explain it for the first time. Your body does not process carbohydrates equally at all hours of the day. The exact same slice of bread, the same type, the same amount, produces a measurably different blood sugar spike depending on when you eat it. This is not willpower. This is not imagination. This is circadian biology, and it is completely reproducible in a lab. Here is what happens. Insulin sensitivity, how efficiently your cells respond to insulin and pull glucose out of the blood, follows a daily rhythm. It is highest in the morning and declines steadily as the day goes on. By evening, your cells are significantly less responsive to the same insulin signal. The reason involves 2 hormones working on opposite schedules. Cortisol, your body's alertness and stress hormone, peaks in the early morning. It actively supports glucose metabolism. As cortisol drops through the afternoon and evening, your system becomes less efficient at handling incoming sugar. Meanwhile, melatonin, the hormone that prepares your body for sleep, begins rising in the evening. Research has shown that melatonin directly suppresses insulin secretion from the pancreas. Less insulin available means more glucose sitting in the blood with nowhere to go. The practical takeaway is clear. If you are going to eat bread, eat it at breakfast or lunch. That is when your body is best equipped to handle it. Eating bread at dinner, and especially close to bedtime, is when it does the most damage to your blood sugar curve. Your pancreas is already winding down for the night. Sending a rush of glucose at that moment is like asking a closing shop to handle the biggest order of the day. Many patients tell me this single change, moving their bread from dinner to morning, made a bigger difference on their meter than they expected. There are 2 more tools you can use starting tonight, and both of them are probably already sitting in your kitchen. The first is fat. When you add a healthy fat to your bread, olive oil, avocado, even a layer of butter, it slows gastric emptying. The bread sits in your stomach longer before moving into the small intestine where glucose absorption happens. The mechanism is a hormone called cholecystokinin, or CCK. Fat triggers its release, and CCK sends a direct signal to slow the movement of food from the stomach into the intestine. Slower movement means slower glucose delivery. Your pancreas gets time to keep up. This is not a new discovery. Traditional Mediterranean cultures have been dipping bread in olive oil for centuries. Those same populations have historically lower rates of metabolic disease than cultures that eat bread dry or spread it with jam. They were not thinking about glycemic curves. They were just eating the way their grandparents taught them. The physiology was working in their favor the entire time. The second tool is acidity. A splash of vinegar in a salad, eaten alongside your bread, or even a glass of water with lemon, has been shown in clinical studies to reduce the post-meal glucose spike by 20 to 30%. The acetic acid in vinegar directly interferes with the enzymes that break starch down into glucose in your small intestine. It physically slows the conversion. Less glucose released per minute means a lower, flatter curve on your meter. Now combine everything. A slice of dense sourdough dipped in olive oil, eaten after a salad dressed with vinegar, alongside a piece of fish or chicken. That is not deprivation. That is a genuinely enjoyable meal. And that is a diabetic patient eating bread intelligently, with their blood sugar staying remarkably stable. No extra medication, no guilt, just understanding how the system works and using it. This one surprises almost every patient I share it with. It sounds too simple to be real, but the research behind it is solid. When you toast bread, or even just let it cool completely after baking, the starch inside it physically changes structure. A portion of the digestible starch, the kind that breaks down quickly into glucose, converts into resistant starch. Resistant starch is exactly what the name suggests. Your digestive enzymes cannot break it down efficiently. It passes through your small intestine largely undigested, behaves more like fiber than like a carbohydrate, and feeds beneficial bacteria in your gut instead of spiking your blood sugar. The mechanism has a name: retrogradation. When starch cools, the glucose chains rearrange themselves into tighter, more crystalline structures. Those structures are harder for enzymes to unlock. Toasting reinforces this change even further by driving out moisture and stiffening the starch matrix. The result is measurable. Clinical data shows that toasted or cooled bread produces a lower glycemic response than fresh warm bread made from the exact same dough, same ingredients, same recipe. The only difference is temperature and time. The practical application could not be simpler. If you buy bread or bake it at home, let it cool completely before you eat it, or toast it. That is a zero-effort, zero-cost change that reduces the blood sugar impact of any bread, including breads that are not ideal to begin with. And here is something worth knowing. This same principle applies to rice, potatoes, and pasta. Cooked and cooled starchy foods consistently produce a lower glucose response than the same foods eaten hot and fresh. When I explain this to patients, many of them feel genuine relief. It is not another restriction. It is not something taken away. It is a tool they can use every single day, at every meal, without changing what they eat, just how they prepare it. You now have a set of tools that most diabetic patients never learn. But there are 5 common mistakes that can cancel out every smart choice you just made. I want to walk through each one so you never make them by accident. The first mistake is eating bread on a completely empty stomach. No vegetables before it, no protein, no fat, nothing to slow the glucose down. That bread hits your small intestine with zero buffer, and the sugar floods your bloodstream exactly the way we talked about at the beginning of this video. All that knowledge about meal sequencing means nothing if you grab a slice of bread as your first bite of the day. The second mistake is pairing bread with sweet spreads. Jam, honey, sweetened peanut butter. You are taking a food that already converts to glucose and layering more sugar directly on top of it. The glycemic hit doubles. Your pancreas never had a chance. The third mistake is eating bread late at night, especially after a sedentary evening on the couch. Your insulin sensitivity is at its lowest point. Your muscles are inactive and not pulling glucose out of the blood. That is the worst possible moment to send a wave of starch into your system. The fourth mistake is drinking fruit juice or sweetened drinks alongside bread. Liquid sugar absorbs even faster than bread starch. The combination creates a compounding spike that overwhelms your insulin response from 2 directions at once. The fifth mistake is assuming gluten-free bread is better for blood sugar. Most gluten-free breads are made with refined rice flour or tapioca starch, and both of those spike blood sugar faster than regular wheat bread. Gluten-free solves a gluten problem. It does not solve a glucose problem. None of these are moral failures. They are physics. Your body follows rules. Once you understand the rules, you stop making errors that work against you without even realizing it. Let me bring everything together into a plan you can start using today. No guesswork. No confusion. Just clear steps. 1. Switch your bread. Look for dense sourdough sprouted grain bread, or heavy rye with visible intact kernels. Put back the soft white and the standard commercial whole wheat. If the bread is light and squeezable, it is not working for you. 2. Always eat bread last in the meal. Vegetables first, protein second, bread comes after. Every meal, every time. That sequence alone can flatten your post-meal spike by 30 to 40%. 3. Keep it to one slice per meal as your starting point. The right bread in the wrong quantity still overwhelms your pancreas. 4. Eat bread earlier in the day. Breakfast or lunch when your insulin sensitivity is at its peak, not dinner, not before bed. 5. Add fat. Dip your bread in olive oil, top it with avocado. That fat slows gastric emptying and gives your body time to process the glucose. 6. Add acidity to the meal. A vinegar-dressed salad alongside the bread, or a glass of water with lemon. That alone can reduce the spike by 20 to 30%. 7. Toast your bread or let it cool completely before eating. The starch restructures into a form your body absorbs more slowly. Zero cost, zero effort. 8. Never eat bread alone on an empty stomach, and never pair it with jam, honey, fruit juice, or sweetened drinks. This is not about perfection. It is not about fear or deprivation. It is about understanding the rules your body operates by and making small, specific adjustments that produce real, measurable results on your meter. Bread is not your enemy. It never was. The way you were eating it was the problem, and now you know how to fix it. And if you have not done it yet, that free diabetes screening link is in the description. 30 seconds to fill out, and it could connect you with monitoring and care options you did not know were available near you. Take care of yourself.